Hi, this is Brian Stevens from SPYPOINT, and I'm excited to talk with Roger Sigler today, world-class shed hunter. Roger's not only going to provide some tips around using dogs and the science behind antler hunting, but he's also going to provide some tips for those of you that already have dogs and how to get started into one of the fastest growing sports in the outdoor industry. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the SPYPOINT Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Stevens, and on this show, we get to talk about hunting, tactics, technology, and the inside scoop from industry pros. Follow along each month as we learn, laugh, and grow together with the passion we all have for the outdoors. This is the SPYPOINT Podcast. Welcome to the podcast today, Roger. How you doing?
I'm just doing great. How about you?
Doing well. What's the weather like in your neck of the woods today? Here in Georgia, it's pretty darn chilly.
It's about 50 degrees and beautiful sunny day.
Outstanding. Where do you live? Where are you from, Roger?
Kansas City.
Kansas City. Beautiful. Great state, great whitetail state. So Today is going to be a topic that I think is going to be interesting to a lot of people. Spring is around the corner, and one of the things that people love to do this time of year, besides turkey hunt, is to hunt for shed antlers. And you are an expert at it. You have a tremendous legacy in doing this, not only with yourself but also with your wife. But before we jump into some of the topics, I thought it would be great for you to just, introduce people into, your background, how you got started, how all of this sport originated from the things that you and your wife did. And then, we can jump into some specific areas of conversation. But let's just, level set and get a little bit of information about yourself and how you got introduced into the sport.
Okay. I think you have to go back in my training or our training history. Back in the 60s when we got started training professionally. Now, I was a businessman at the same time, but training dogs or training animals has always been my passion. So rather than playing golf or tennis, I would train animals, and had the opportunity to get to train with some of the greatest animal trainers that ever lived, doing really remarkable things. The things that average trainers who wouldn't even think about. An example of that might be, we go to California once a year and we work with the top marine mammal trainers out there, where they're training sea lions and we're training horses and dogs and birds. But it's been a journey. We started with pointing dogs back in the 60s. My wife and I, we were in the dental business, but we didn't play golf or tennis. So we'd train bird dogs all summer long, and then we'd take our doctor customers to Canada, where we'd hunt birds on the prairie. And the first year we went up, we took 8 doctors and 16 dogs. And we continued to do that for about 30 years. We would switch off from Canadian prairie to Hell's Canyon, where we'd hunt chuckers out there. But I've literally trained hundreds of bird dogs, and that includes pointers, setters, Brittany's, you name it. But as we moved along, we also got involved with a German discipline called Schützen. And Schützen is generally German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois, and these are dogs that will either track you, do bombs and drugs, and bite. And we imported dogs out of Germany. And the background, once again, and understanding these dogs, different breeds. For example, if you want to work cattle, you're going to get a border collie. If you want a dog to bite, you're going to get a shepherd or a Mal. The breed. And before we even get into this, I'll say this because I think it's really critical. The most important part of having an antler dog is to have the right dog. If you've got the right dog, you can get the job done. But if you don't, an example that might be, you can't train a collie to chase a rabbit like a beagle.
Yep.
Now, the lab is the most popular breed worldwide, 3-to-1 over any other dog, and there's a reason for that. They're multitaskers. You can do bombs, drugs, cancer, seizures. I mean, the list just kind of goes on and on. Now, not just any lab. You're looking for a very specific kind of lab. Now, when we started training antler dogs 15 years ago, we actually invented the sport. When we started talking about this, no one had a clue as to how these dogs work. They thought that they were like bird dogs or like a coon dog, where you just turn them loose and they'd run out there and you'd be hunting for them most of the time. But it's not. It's nothing like that. These dogs are basically working in unison with us. Okay. And so having the right dog and getting to the right dog is really, really important. When we first started this 15 years ago, we would just buy a dog here or a dog there. The way that we get all of our dogs today, of the 500 that we've trained, we've taken the top 7 males, we pull semen on them, we save it at K-State. When we have a first-class female, we sell her with a breeding agreement, and wherever she goes in the country, we ship semen to that family. They raise the puppies until they're 8 weeks of age, and then we buy them all back. Now, when we get them at 8 weeks of age, no one knows anything about them. They're all little and cute, but that doesn't tell us anything about their skill sets. So we put them into our program, and we call it drafting your antler dogs. In the world of human sports, you would never draft a player until you knew what his skills were: hand-eye coordination, vertical leap, etc. Now, when these players go to the combine, those tests greatly determine where that guy is going to go in the draft. Well, exactly the same way with these dogs. As we're testing them, okay, they all make great pets, but only some make world-class antler dogs.
Okay.
So, but knowing what these dogs are, okay, retriever trainers think they're retrievers. Well, that's part of it. But what they really are is they're detection dogs. If you're training a bomb dog, a drug dog, a cancer detection dog, a seizure dog, it doesn't matter. You're simply training a dog to find a specific item that they've been trained to find. So that's what we're doing with the antler dogs. We're training them to sniff out horns out in the woods independently, all by themselves. And when they find them, pick them up and bring them back to us. And we laugh all the time. We say, if you're hunting horns without a dog, you're just going for a walk in the woods. So whenever you put a dog into the sport, any sport, whether or not it's pheasant hunting, coon hunting, you're always selecting a dog and teaching it, okay, to do a specific job, and that's what these antler dogs do.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
No, that's a great level set. So let's move into, one of the first aspects of, once you have a dog trained, what do you then do as far as, using that dog on a piece of property? Where do you start? You just let them go, or do you have a certain area based on where, you have deer pattern and, bedding areas and things of that nature? How do you go about it once you have a dog ready to get out in the woods and start doing this with you?
Well, of course, you're looking for deer sign just as any deer hunter would, and you don't have any idea whether or not, for the most part, whether or not the sign is bucks or does. But you're looking for the kind of sign, much like if you're hunting. And we do a lot of hunting around food plots, probably 100-yard a circle around the food plot, because that's where the deer are going to be coming in, and their path in and out of there is the most likely place that they're going to be dropping their horns. Now, I talked about going to Canada and hunting birds on the prairie. Somewhere back in the 80s, when we were hunting up in Canada, we ran into a Canadian trapper, and he has since become a very close friend of mine. When we switched from hunting birds to hunting horns, I had remembered all those big bucks we used to see up in Saskatchewan, and I called him, the trapper, and asked him if he would locate some bedding sites for us, because we wanted to come back up in the spring rather than in the fall to hunt horns with our dogs. He thought we were just kidding. We showed up, and we had, I think, 11 dogs, and we were going to stay 2 weeks, but it started snowing after 5 days. In that first 5 days, we found 210 sheds.
Wow.
Now, if you understand how deer yard up in Canada or in the cold weather, okay, if you take 10,000 acres and there's 200 deer in that 10,000 acres during the summer, come winter when they yard up, those same 200 deer will probably be in an area no bigger than 100 acres. And if you find where that is, okay, and they're usually feeding with cattle, that's where you hunt horns. Now, the trapper happened to know where all of those bedding sites are where they were yarded up. So when we got there, he said, well, there were 200 down here and 300 over there and 150 over here. So we just hunted where he pointed and told us to go. Now, without him, okay, if you hunted that other 900 some plus acres, you wouldn't find a horn. But if you know where they've been yarded up, then that's where you hunt. And we went up one draw and found 57 horns.
Wow. And I mean, I guess you could take the same, philosophy to the Midwest or even the Southeast or somewhere else. I mean, the key is just, finding, where that bedding area is. And in the Southeast, we don't have these colder temperatures like you do, obviously, in Canada, where they're going to, congregate into such tight areas because of, the need for food and shelter. But there's still, I think, the same concept is, find that bedding area, and that's where you're going to find most of, your sheds.
Yeah,
or the food plots.
Yeah, they'll congregate around feed, especially if you if you have heavy snow or something like that. And the right time of the year, if you find those spots, you can find lots of horns.
No, that makes a lot of sense. How did you get started into this? I mean, you talk about your wife, but what was there something that happened that you guys, had the idea to start using dogs instead of, just, on a horse or walking? How did all this come to fruition?
Well, my wife and I, my wife loves horses and we ride a lot. And we were riding one day, and she noticed that I was looking around, and she says, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "I'm looking for deer antlers." And she happened to look down, and she says, "Like those two right there?" There was a matched pair between her horse and mine. And I said, "Yeah, exactly like that." And she said, "Do you suppose that we could train dogs to find those antlers?" And so at that time, I had a pit bull and a German Shepherd. So just to test out to see if it was possible, I started working with them. Now, the Shepherd wasn't much good at it, but the pit bull was really pretty good. He very slow and plotty, but he would stay in the game. He would stay at the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd seen enough from them just to say, hey, if we had the right dog, what would this look like? And so, not knowing anything about that particular scent work, you might call it, I started to study and once again work with probably the greatest scenting dog trainer that ever lived. And his name was Bill Tolhurst. Now, Tolhurst, his history was he patrolled the beaches of New Jersey off a horsebacking dog during World War II. After the war, he went to Buffalo, New York, where he set up the first police canine program in the country. And the guy was a very prolific writer, a genius in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But he wrote 3 books. The first one was the Police Handbook Manual, where almost all police departments use his manual to set the standard for that department. And a lot of it covered protection of the crime scene. But I'll just tell this one quick story because I think it's interesting. He invented a machine where if a bank robber had robbed a bank and he had walked in and put his hands on the counter, he could then come back with a machine and suck the scent off of the counter and run it through a sterile gauze and then put it in a sterile jar. Then 5 years later, if they did a lineup of men and one of them was that guy that they'd captured the scent on, okay, they'd give the dog a sniff of that scent, and he would go right down the lineup and pick out that guy.
Wow.
So just about everybody that I've worked with along the way were incredibly creative and doing really unusual things with all kinds of different animals. And I mean, I could go on and on and on about these people that were, and it's all based in science. I mean,
mm-hmm.
conventional horse and dog trainers, it's all there's not a lot of science involved with it. But when you get involved at really high levels, okay, like I said, we go to California once a year or so, and we work with the top marine mammal trainers out there. And when you're training sea lions and we're training horses and dogs and birds when you're out there, you're training a whole different kind of training. You're training all reward-based training, no choke chains, no electricity, no beating up on the animals in any kind of way. And we do that not because we're animal rights nuts, which we kind of are, but because the results that you can get in training these animals to do really remarkable things. And if you kind of want to prove this, I mean, when you're training a dolphin, people have been led to believe that dolphins are doing all those wonderful tricks because they just love people. But the truth of the matter is the dolphin is doing it for one reason, and that is you've got something that he wants, and if he gives you something you've got, then it's an exchange. But getting back to antler dogs, okay, one of the first things that I did, okay, because I was really curious about did antlers give off any kind of a scent? So Auburn University has a great drug dog school, and there's two parts. The first part is how dogs learn, and the second part is practical application. So I called down to Auburn, and I was talking to one of the researchers, and I told him, or asked him, I said, I want to train dogs to find antlers. Do antlers give off scent? And he said, well, yeah, almost everything gives off scent. And I said, well, could you compare, let's say, to a hot dog? He said, it doesn't work that way. I said, well, how does it work? He says, let's just pretend that you're driving down the street with your dog buddy, and you pass an Italian restaurant, and you know that you've passed an Italian restaurant. But if your dog buddy is there with you, he will break down the recipe. He will tell you paprika, ketchup, garlic. He knows the recipe in his head.
Yep.
Okay? So, yes, antlers do give off scent, and they give off, especially in the right scenting conditions, they give off a tremendous amount of scent.
Visit spypoint.com/insiders to learn all about the new SPYPOINT Insiders Club that gets you incredible discounts on things like photo transmission plans and accessories, free shipping from spypoint.com, exclusive content and giveaway access, and the most advanced mobile scouting tools SPYPOINT has to offer. That's spypoint.com/insiders. You obviously have, in your world, high-level trained dogs. You're obviously training other animals at a very high level, but specific to antler hunting, what about somebody who has a lab or has a dog that, they want to, explore and see if they have the ability to, find these sheds and get started and just try at that level? What are some tips and things that you would suggest to them to at least get introduced if they have a dog that has the potential capabilities to do this and, just have fun and explore it?
Okay. Well, like I said, it's the most critical part is having the right dog. Now, for the average person, that's difficult to do because they may have a terrible dog but think it's a great dog, so they could have a great dog and think it's a terrible dog because they don't have anything to draw on. Now, we have a book out on Amazon called Antler Dog Tales.
Okay.
That takes you through the kind of the general ideas of how to go about doing this, selecting the dog.
Perfect.
So, okay. And then we have a DVD that runs for an hour that shows the step-by-steps again. Now, in evaluating your dog, okay, and this is about any dog sport, okay, you're looking, if I'm training dogs to bite people, I'm looking for a dog that has very specific drives, okay, and those drives, the stronger they are, the more likely they're going to be a good candidate. And it's kind of like an aptitude test on the human side.
Yep.
So at 8 weeks of age, no one could tell whether or not the puppies they're looking at they're all little and cute, but that doesn't tell you anything about their skill sets. Now, a human baby learns 80% of what they're going to learn by the time they're 5 years old. A puppy learns 80% of what they're going to learn by what age do you think?
2.
16 weeks.
16 weeks. Wow.
Right. Now, that first 16 weeks, okay, what it really entails is introducing that dog to the world around them. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, if I'm training a drug dog and in practice it is great, but the first time you take it into an airport where there's 1,000 people and a marching band,
lots of distractions. Yep.
Yeah, these dogs have to go about doing their work no matter what's going on. But all of that is learned very early on in their life. Exposure to, fences, water, four-wheelers, cows. I mean, anything you can expose them to. Now, at the same time, you're testing them for some of their other skill sets, which are all, probably not between 10 and 16 weeks as important as that social aspect of their life. Okay? Now, as they start to develop, you're working on different areas. And I like to describe it like if you took your kid to school, okay, we all learn incrementally. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, if you took your child, do you have any children?
I have 3.
Okay, if you took your little darling to school and the first day the teacher gave it a book and asked you to read, it would never learn to read. The way they learn to read is ABCs and then a very simple word and a little more advanced word, a little more advanced word. Okay, and somewhere around their senior year in college, if they go to school in Missouri, if there's enough pictures in the book, they can kind of read. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I tell that story all over the country because I am so concerned about our educational system. Okay. And I don't think our kids are learning anything, but that's a whole different subject. But getting back to the incremental portion of it, when your kid goes to school, when he first gets there, he may take a little math, he may take a little spelling, he maybe takes a nap, he gets to go to recess, he has lunch, and then he has a little spelling. Now, all of those are departmentalized, but combined, they make up the first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade. Okay, so it's just not one subject. Well, when you're working and training a dog, okay, you're working on what we call the dry work. Okay, set down, stay, come to their name, come to whistle, all of those types of things, which you can train any dog to do those. Okay, I don't care if it's a poodle or a pug. Okay, now, but when you start to get into the more advanced work, okay, you're looking for more specific skill sets, and some of it is around the retrieve, some of it is around scent discrimination, some of it is around, and the most critical part of any drive within these dogs is hunt. The dogs absolutely have to hunt because if they just want to walk along beside you and wait for you to throw a stick, you don't have an antler dog, you have a stick dog. Okay, so the hunt is by far the most critical drive. And as you're evaluating your dog, once again, if you've exposed him to nature the way I've kind of described, okay, you're looking for the dog that will go out and what we call stay in the game. So let's just, and you can do this with almost any object. You take it, let's say you use a ball or an antler, it doesn't matter, and you throw it out in the deep weeds. You want to see how long I don't even care if the dog finds it. What I'm looking for is to see how long that dog is going to look for it. Now, obviously, at 10, 12 weeks of age, they're not going to stay out there very long, but you start to see glimpses of that drive to stay with the hunt. Okay? And as you advance, you're always, once again, like a kid who may go to the first, second, third, fourth grade. Well, as you're evaluating these dogs, you'll get a sense as to when you're ready to go to the next step, meaning you might throw it a little deeper into the grass. You may working against the wind, not against the wind. You're doing all, but you're wanting to see that this dog is going to stay with it. Now, some of them, okay, from a very early age, okay, will show you those drives that you're wanting to see. Others, sometimes it's a little later, but they have to show what we want to see, or no matter how good a trainer you are, you can't. And the example I give again is, if you had a beagle and he didn't like rabbits, you can't beat him or shock him, or there's nothing you can do to make him want to hunt that rabbit. Okay, Same thing is true with these antler dogs. Okay, you're looking for a dog that will obsess over that horn to the point where they will hunt day after day after day after day, whether you're finding horns or not. They're staying in the game. So once again, as you start to evaluate these dogs, and once again, it can be something as very simple as just like it's throwing the antler into the deep weeds. And you can't expect, once again, at 12 weeks, but once again, I've trained so many of these, you get a real good idea. You think, wow, this dog is really going to develop into a world-class antler dog. Now, if you have 5 puppies in a litter, okay, you're looking for a couple of different things. Okay, if you're testing these guys with a ball, or
Okay.
I prefer an antler if they'll chase it. Okay, but if you take puppy number 1 and you roll a ball out in front of it, and he just watches it roll out, he's probably not going to be a candidate. Okay. Now, once again, this isn't at 10 weeks of age. This is that period between 10 weeks and 16 weeks. You have to see some interest in it.
Sure.
Now, the next puppy you roll a ball out, it runs right out and looks at it and keeps right on going. He's probably not going to make it. Puppy number 3, you roll the ball out, it runs right out, picks it up, carries it over a few feet, loses interest and goes on. Puppy number 4, you roll the ball out, he runs right out and gets it and brings it back, puts it in your hand. Puppy number 5, you roll the ball out, it runs right out and gets it, brings it about halfway back and lays down with it. Now you're trying to coax it in. Okay, he's looking right at you, and you're calling his name, you're whistling, you're clapping your hands, but he just sits there and looks at you. Okay, so you take a step towards him, he picks it up and runs off with it. Now, of your 4th and 5th puppy, which one is your candidate?
Number 4.
Well, my wife likes the number 4 dog, but I love the number 5 dog because when he's laying there looking at me and I'm trying to coax him in, you know what he's thinking? He's thinking this thing is way too good for me. I'm not going to give it to Roger.
Got it.
That covetousness. Okay, you can always train them to bring it to you, but you can't train them to love it to the point where they don't want to give it up.
Gotcha.
Now, if you have a bunch of those dogs and you don't know what you're doing, okay, professional retriever trainers force fetch them all. Okay, and that's a pretty brutal thing. It's in force fetch. Well, let me say this: when you're training fear-based training, choke chains and electricity, okay, the dog gets punished for every wrong decision. Set, choke, come, shot. Okay, when you're training true reward-based training, the animal gets rewarded for every right decision.
Yep. Which obviously is better all the way around.
Right. And especially, I mean, when you start training at a high level, like when we go to California and you're working with the sea lions, you're never putting a choke chain or electricity. I mean, these animals are all working because, once again, it's a relationship. Okay. We call it the science of participative training, where the animal is working with you. And that same thing is true whether or not you're training horses or birds. And once again, an example might be, if you wanted to train a bird to talk, you're definitely not putting a choke chain on it and say, give them a yank and say, talk. Okay, you've got to be understand how to get these animals to cooperate with you, like training birds. If you go to Disneyland, you watch birds ride bicycles and stuff like that. I mean, it's all coordination between you and the animal, and they give you what you want, and they get what you've got. So that's simple. So getting back to the puppies, okay, I like the number 5 dog. Well, how does that play out in the real world? Okay, now, if you had all 5 of these same pups in training, when you were through, the first dog, he might find horn, but I doubt it, okay? I wouldn't consider him an antler dog. The next one may be a little better, but for my money, it's still not an antler dog. Then on the number 3 dog, they'll find 1 to every one you find. The number 4 dog will find 2 to every one you find, and the number 5 dog will find 3 to every one you find.
Gotcha.
Now, my friend Norman, who has 5 or 6 dogs, about half of them are ours. We went to South Dakota okay, horn hunting in May. Now, he called me and said, he wanted to go up there. And I said, this in May, the grass is going to be, 10 inches tall. And it was going to be a waste of time. But I did it as a favor to him. Okay. When we got up there, it was about 40 degrees, and it had rained the night before. In a day and a half, we found 27 horns. Now, the amazing part about it to me is these are Norman or I found one of those 27. The dogs found all 27 of them, and all 27 of them were the previous year's horns.
Wow.
These dogs were running down through a game trail, and it was just like if they swapped ends to point a bird. Now, once again, I can tell those kind of stories, but I can also tell the stories where we went and we didn't find any horns, okay? And I kind of like thinking about hunting horns. If you've ever fished for salmon in Alaska, when you're flying over all of that water and you look down and you think, man, we're going to kill them today. But if you happen to be up there a week before the run, no matter how hard you fish, you're not going to catch a salmon. They've got to be in before you find them. So when you're hunting horns with a dog, it's exactly the same thing. There has to be horns there to be found. And sometimes you walk into a place, okay, and there's more human tracks than there are deer tracks. Well, you're probably odds are doing very well at finding horns is not there. But if anybody ever hunts, if they like hunting horns, okay, and you do it with the dog, you're never going to hunt without it. It's just like a guy that if he rabbit hunts, he's never going to hunt without a beagle, or a coon. He's never going to hunt without a coon dog. And that's what's making this sport so popular. The majority of our customers, and we have the greatest book of customers, okay, anything from politicians, professional sports athletes, just lots of guys that love to hunt, and a lot of outfitters buy these dogs. And part of the reason for that is, okay, they can prospect with them. For example, if they know there's a couple big deer on this farm, okay, and the season is over, and they go in with their dog and they find the horns, they know that the deer made it through the hunting season, and so it tells them, and they might even tell you exactly where you're going to find these bucks, okay, because they, even though they move around in certain times of year, you're going to find them in certain states.
Sure.
Yeah. So they're using them for prospecting.
No, that's incredibly helpful. So let me ask you, from somebody outside looking in, again, you have people that have done this for years that are experts. But I also want to talk about somebody who, really wants to dive in a little bit deeper. How can they, you talked about your book and your DVD on Amazon. What else, where else could they find contact information from you to just talk about, again, whether it's purchasing a dog, it's training a dog, talking about, shed hunting in their part of the country, to just gain some more insight and have some communication with you and your wife? How could they go about doing that?
Okay. Well, once again, as I say over and over again, it's about the quality of your dog. Now, that doesn't mean how much you paid for the dog. You may buy a dog from your neighbor out of just a nothing litter, and it may end up being a world-class Antler dog. But your odds are better, okay, if you now some of the things that you need to look for when you're getting a dog. The health of the dog is really, really critical. You want to be sure that the dog has good hips, good eyes, good elbows, clear of any kind of genetic stuff like EIC, because these are all very debilitating issues. And if you have the time that you're going to put into the dog, you want to be sure that you're starting with a quality animal. Now, from there, once again, they can buy a pup from us, okay, that started. We keep them until they're 16 weeks of age. We never sell it. Of all the dogs we've sold maybe one or two at 8 weeks. But I really advise people not to do that, because you may pick out the worst dog in the litter. Okay, what you're wanting to see now, okay, when the dogs get to be 14 to 16 weeks, these drives that I'm talking about really start to come to the forefront, and now you could maybe pick one out, okay? And the next thing, I insist that if we're selling one of these dogs, that the dogs become part of the family. They ride around in your truck. If you're out prospecting, I just sent a dog home just this morning to New York, and the guy is a realtor, and he's using this dog to go into the properties he's going to buy, so he has some kind of idea for his prospect what they might find there. So they're using him for a lot of different ways, but the dogs are never going to develop to the level that I think they can if they don't become part of the family. And how these dogs, once again, they have a sense, okay, of what's expected of them, and they become what you want them to be if you've got the right dog. It's just pretty amazing. We received a litter from out in Kansas, and my wife made a remark the other day. She said, it looks like these dogs came pre-trained. I mean, they just understood what their jobs were going to be. Now, we happened to buy a litter from northwest Missouri, and beautiful dogs, but I mean, absolutely no drive, none. It just drove us crazy because you would think that it'd be there, but it's not. And so you get that wide range of skills that you're looking for. And the average person, when they go out to buy a lab, they want to buy an 8-week-old pup. But if we advise all of our clients, okay, they want to come and look at a litter. In fact, I've got a guy coming in this weekend, okay, and he wants to look at his dog. The dogs are only 7 weeks old. I'm going to tell him, do not choose one, because you may choose the worst one in the litter, okay? And if you want a performance dog, you just don't go about it like that.
Gotcha.
And I laugh. I say to guys, if I'm selling racehorses, do you call me and ask for a gray mare? No, you want one that runs fast.
Yep.
Okay. And that's exactly the same thing with these performance dogs. But once again, they all make incredible pets. I mean, they just do. I'm sitting here looking at my dog right now. His name is Partner. He does shows with me all over the country. An incredible Antler dog. He's also a therapy dog, and he's one of the few that I've trained where he literally will go into a nursing home and be the gentlest, kindest thing. But the minute you take him to the field, I mean, he looks like a bullet running around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, extremely high energy.
Love it.
But anyway, getting back to, okay, and if somebody wants to get into it, I'll spend any amount of time, whether or not they buy a dog from us or not, to help them to get into the sport the right way. And if they have a dog of their own, I'll test their dog for free to tell them whether or not that I think they have a candidate. And if their dog is a candidate, I'll help them train it. I won't charge them anything, or I'll give them advice as to where they might find a dog in their area. Although like I said, we have dogs all over the United States, Canada, Europe, and so we have them pretty much anywhere where people have dogs.
So how does somebody get in touch with you?
They can reach us at antlerdogs.com, and dogs is plural, or they can call me at 816-289-1154. And I have a national dog food sponsor too that that provides us with the highest quality dog foods, which is another thing you might consider. But in selecting a puppy, okay, a couple of things. One is you want to be sure that the parents are certified, clean hips, eyes, and elbows, because if you do that, there's a really good chance that that the pups that you're getting will be clean in those same areas. So you're starting with a quality animal. And then the next thing, like I said, is to read up on it. Okay, and it's when I say what I learned a long time ago. It's not practice makes perfect, but it's perfect practice makes perfect. And when you're training, it helps if you're talking to somebody that really knows what they're talking about, because for the most part, this is a relatively new sport, and there's just not a lot of knowledge being shared around. But I'm willing to, like I said, to spend any amount of time talking to somebody about their dog or how to get into sport.
That's awesome. That's That's just incredible. So, Roger, it's been a super productive and enjoyable conversation today. Any last words of advice or parting words for anybody around the sport? I mean, it's right around the corner. Where are you going to be starting this spring and getting everything going for you and your wife?
Well, the ideal time to hunt horns is obviously starting in probably mid-February, mid this month. Okay, but the prime time is between probably the 15th of February and the 15th of March. Now, if you get too much further into March, you start to heat and vegetation are the enemies of these dogs. Okay, for example, they don't do very well in 12 inches of green bean field. Okay, they don't. Okay, so and then heat. These dogs, they're hard working and they don't do well. 80. Anything above 80 degrees. Now you can hunt them, okay, but in the summer when we're training, I like to train in a cut wheat field because there's no vegetation in there, and for all practical purposes, it's just like hunting in the middle of the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to do it early in the morning or late at night. But so we'll be starting in February. And another really interesting thing is I don't think I've ever gone to a farmer and asked him if I could hunt horns that he's refused to let me hunt horns, because these guys want those things out of there because they get in their tractor tires and you're not affecting their deer herd or anything like that. So the farmers really will welcome you in.
Oh, that's great. That's great feedback, and that's a very true statement. Well, Roger, thank you so much, and I hope we can get you back on here, because I think we just started to peel the onion back a little bit, and there's a lot more to the science and the application. But I think for somebody wanting to get started in the sport, you've given them some things to think about. You've talked about the dogs, a little bit of the science, and where they can go get more resources, whether it be literature or to be able to contact you and pick your brain and get some advice from that standpoint. So I can't thank you enough, Roger, and I wish you a ton of success in the next 2 or 3 weeks as you get started with this.
I don't get to horn hunt as much as I would like to, because we usually have 15 to 20 dogs in training. There's 3 of us that train, my wife, my daughter, and myself. And if you have one of your dogs with me and I start talking about all the horn hunting I've been doing, I'm wondering if you're thinking, well, who's training my dog?
Sure.
Okay. So, but we'll do our share simply because the dogs that we're bringing along, you have to have a certain amount of field time with them so that they fully develop. So we may take 7, 8, 10 dogs with us when we go, and we'll hunt them maybe 2 at a time and get them their exposure to the game.
No, that's totally get it. Totally get it. Well, Roger, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
I really appreciate you giving me the time to share the passion that we have for hunting horns with dogs.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you.
Don't forget to visit spypoint.com/project for all the latest from Project SPYPOINT, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube for all the latest on SPYPOINT trail cameras and the outdoors.